introduce them really quickly, that would be great. So we just kind of have an idea of people's background and their familiarity with any of our products. That would be great to know as well. And if you're a practitioner yourself and you're on our team, we'd love to hear from you as well. You want to start, Hilda, and then we can move on to Dr. Patty? Sometimes it gets stuck. You can't unmute.
I can go while she gets herself unmuted. I'm Dr. Patty Gonzalez. I'm a retired chiropractor. I've been using the drops for about 2 months and seen incredible results. I've got 2 docs on here that I can see, Charlene and Jody, and then actually my new team member, Brittany, who is getting her naturopathic certification. So these are phenomenal products. I'm really excited to hear from you, Dr. Strand, and just learn more about how we can really help more people with this. Thank you, ladies, for coming.
Dr. Carl, would you like to speak up? It's good to see you here.
Hello.
Where are you at? What kind of, can you want to give us a little bit of background if you don't mind?
Yeah, so I'm retired, but I've always been interested in the wellness movement. So that's what I'm spending my retirement doing now, is just getting involved with it and learning all about it. And you know, these drops I'm very interested in, and using them myself, and have seen some results. So I thought I'd join this
Well, thank you.
Zoom meeting.
You're going to learn from the best.
Excellent.
Is there any other, Susan, that you know that's on here?
Yeah, Kevin's on here. Kevin, you want to introduce yourself and anybody that you invited?
Yes, my name's Kevin Kennedy. I'm a naturopathic doctor in Oklahoma City and also an NAET practitioner. And I have a friend, Dr. Amanda Sadler. She's an MD. And Amanda, I'm probably going to like mess this all up, so you can jump in and fix all my mistakes. But Amanda's an MD. She's a sports medicine doctor, but also a functional medicine practitioner. And she is at this amazing medical clinic that we have at the University of Oklahoma in Norman. That's, I mean, I think they've got 8 basketball courts, you know, every, you know, top of the line medical equipment, athletes. And anyway, Amanda's really amazing. And I think she's here. Thank you.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Kevin, for inviting me. And you did a wonderful job kind of telling what I do, but I do sports medicine through the lens of functional medicine, but I have a lot of patients that come in that are interested in weight loss, and I don't like a lot of the current options that we have. I do spend a lot of time on diet, nutrition, lifestyle, exercise, of course, but still some patients I just can't move the needle with. And so Kevin had introduced me to this, and I just wanted to be able to learn more before I started presenting it to patients.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming. You're going to learn from the best. I keep saying it, but you really are. When he starts sharing, it's going to blow you away.
Awesome.
I can go again.
Okay, perfect.
I'm Hilda. I'm in Baltimore, and I'm also a functional medicine practitioner, acupuncturist, clinical nutritionist, transformational life coach. And it's funny because I was praying for a solution for so many of my patients who have hormonal changes. You know, I work with a lot of women who are going through thyroid crisis, going through perimenopause, menopause, and then of course the weight loss. It's a big, you know, everybody around here is struggling with that and is wanting to go on Ozempic. We're in the land of Hopkins. So it has been an uphill battle for me since I moved back to Baltimore in the holistic world. And since COVID, my practice has exploded. And I have about 400 patients now. And so these drops, I think I have now about 200 patients on them and friends. And it's just fantastic. So I really see the incredible benefit of these products. And I myself have been taking them. I'm nursing. So I waited until I was, my baby was 5 months, and I'm blown away. I mean, I even have little baby hairs coming back in. It's just fantastic, and I have fabulous energy, and I shouldn't. So I know these drops are absolutely outstanding and changing my health too. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Hilda. Awesome. Well, great. I think Dr. Strand, if you want to get started, and I know we've got several more in the room, so you guys, thank you for being here. We really do appreciate it. I will say real quick, you guys, I was one of the clients that people like Hilda and like many of you guys treat. I had a really chronic battle with Lyme disease and a seizure disorder and borderline Hashimoto's, and you name it, I had it. And I sought out every top medical doctor, every top homeopath in the world, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to heal. And I did find these drops. And I was like Hilda, my energy was just out of the roof. I was doing back handsprings on a trampoline a week later. And you guys, this was literally after I felt like I could not make it through the day. I had gained 25 pounds. What it did for my anxiety and depression, I would take the drops just for that alone, and only that. It just regulated my mood. I am only 42, and I was borderline full-blown menopause because I went in perimenopause about at the age of 34 after being exposed to toxic mold, and I'm one of the people that can't detox mold. So it's just incredible because my father-in-law got on the drops. 10 days later, he went off of insulin. With our system. And Dr. Strand's probably like, yep, check. I hear it all the time. So for many of us that are newer, like, this is magic. We feel like it's magic. So we just want you guys to be exposed to it, experience it, see how, if you're willing to put it in your practice and help other clients, we would, be so grateful, because that's our goal, is to get these drops and these products into the most hands that we could possibly do through outreach and building relationships. So thank you so much.
Well, let me just take a second and set the stage for Dr. Strand, because you're just meeting him for the first time, but I've had the privilege of knowing him for over 10 years now. And I know this is going to be hard to believe, but he's actually been in the medical field for over 40 years. He looks like maybe 20, right? So he is young. He's still practicing. His wife is amazing, still riding horses. But that was his start. I won't steal his thunder on his journey and passion and how he got to where he is today. But he is the leading authority out there in metabolic syndrome. He has worked with these drops for over 10 to 11 years now. So he's a bestseller. I don't even know. Stop counting how many books, but he's got so many books out there that have been bestsellers, like Death by Nutrition, what your doctors don't know about nutrition, prescriptions that might be killing you. It might botching it. But
yeah, death by prescription, not
death by
nutrition.
prescription. Yes, death by prescription. I'm so sorry. But so he's got a lot of books out there. He's a bestseller, but most importantly, his passion and how he got where he is today in this nutritional world. Make no mistake. He's also the chief, our chief doctor at Partner Co. and product development at Partner Co. So what goes in and how our products are developed, he has his hands in it and on it, and as every part of it. So you're fixing to like what Partner Co. is about and why he chose Partner Co. And how it all came to be. So I'm so privileged and honored, and I'm so glad that you guys are getting to get to hear from the best of the best out here.
Well, I appreciate that, Ashley, and I'm really just trying to see what everybody's interest is, and it seems like it's in weight loss, the drops, the metabolic syndrome. I'm going to explain to you, but I really started in 1995 studying this. I've gone through what many of you experienced with my patients. The hardest thing I dealt with back then, I'm a family practitioner, but everybody was gaining weight, couldn't lose it. If they lost it, they'd quickly gain it back. It was frustrating. And I started researching Dr. Gerald Ravens, and he really came out in the 1980s trying to tell all of us physicians and healthcare professionals, that there's a constellation of problems that occur as we become less and less sensitive to our own insulin. And I'm going to just share a few things now that my journey, because you'll understand where I got my insight. As a family physician here in Rapid City, South Dakota, I was doing annual physicals on the sheriff department, the police department, and our fire department. So I had done that for 25 years when this all occurred. And so what happened is I had physical exams, I had laboratory data annual on every one of these people, and there were men and women, but the majority are men. But what was interesting is when I started to listen to Gerald Ravens and see the changes, and I'll share this with you, I could see the small changes, and you just don't wake up one day and you're diabetic or pre-diabetic. It takes years to develop, and people don't understand this. But when you finally tip over into this abnormal metabolic state, you just can't lose weight effectively. And in fact, if you're able to lose weight, you get it back. You got to correct the underlying problem, which was insulin resistance. That started my 5-year journey. I had 2 nurse practitioners I worked with, and I brought it into my clinic, and we started initially just, I would diagnose prediabetes because I understood it. At that time, it would start out be called Syndrome X and the metabolic syndrome, and then prediabetes. It's all the same thing, just different names. And so what we would do is I would work with them, and I would identify it. I would go ahead, and we started to see patients, and I give them a choice. And as people know, it's hard to convince some people because it takes patient motivation. The most difficult thing you do. And we found out that we had to have some accountability as we taught people the principles I'm going to share with you tonight. And what happened was we just had wonderful results. I mean, the results were so fantastic. It led to 3 different clinical trials, all under an IRB. The last one was the one we published. Was Dr. Holly Wyatt at the University of Colorado, who actually used my program. I put it online so we could use it in these clinical trials. And we saw wonderful results, and I'll share some of that. And as things have gone, there's different, we've just seen it. Well, I didn't have the drops when I initially started. They didn't come into my point of view till 2011. And of course, I was involved with PartnerCo because to me, they were the leaders in quality. I'm a very strong individual on the quality of products. That's the hardest thing you'll find any physician who transfers from traditional medicine and going into functional medicine or preventive medicine or nutritional medicine, is that it's an unregulated market. And so, unless the company itself is going to, make high quality products, they're not required to. And there's a lot of hype out there, but basically I went to PartnerCo after looking at it and found out that all the products were developed in a FDA registered facility. They not only produced pharmaceutical grade nutritional products, but they were also licensed to manufacture over-the-counter drugs. They would take their products and turn them over to third party because a lot of people make claims. NSF is one, Consumer Lab, USP. These are independent third parties that document what PartnerCo says about their product is true. And there might be 2 or 3 other companies that even try to do it. And so that brought me on board. And of course, when I was going through this, I probably in my little practice have found that I've reversed over. Now, I know this is being recorded. I'm going to do a disclaimer. This is for educational purposes. Normally, when I talk to physicians, I can really tell people what's going on and what I see. It's always hard because we can't make claims in PartnerCo. So this is educational, but I did see people improve, and I will share that as we get going. But I'm going to start sharing my screen if that's okay. I think I can do it here. But now that I am, I'm just going to I'm going to share this. I've done this before, but I'm going to just start because everybody seems to be interested in balancing hormones. But I want to clarify what we're doing in regards to this, but I want the practitioners out there, whether you're in, have to realize that 2/3 of the adults and 1/3 of our children are now considered to be either overweight or obese. And 30% of the Americans are trying to lose weight. Another 30% are trying to maintain weight. Americans alone spend over $30 billion each year on diets and weight loss programs. But when you look at the regular medical literature, not the hype that you see, if they're able to lose weight on whatever diet it is, 2/3 of those who lose weight on diets will gain it back within a year. If you go out 2 years in these studies, 98% gain the weight back and more. So diets fail 98% of the time. So, my involvement is I did not want to develop another diet when I got involved with any of these people in my experience in my medical practice. So you should ask yourself, why don't diets work? Well, it's pretty simple. They're a short-term solution for long-term problems. And the majority of these diets are imbalanced, not healthy. I appreciated some of the comments from some of the healthcare practitioners of, they're looking for something that was, sustainable, doable, that was not just a joke. But here's the thing, diets do not tackle the core issue in over 90%, 85, 90% of the problems. I'm not going to negate there is some emotional eating problems out there that account for some major weight gain, but it's insulin resistance. So insulin resistance, is the cause of over 80% of obesity in the US and Canada, and many individuals who are younger and have put on 10 to 20 pounds of unwanted weight usually have not tipped over, but I call them insulin abuse. So prediabetes, and this is Gerald Raven's work, showed that about 1/3 of the adults in the US and Canada already have full-blown prediabetes or diabetes. But there's another 30% of adults that are in the early stage of developing prediabetes. And I'm going to share what I've learned so you can start to recognize these early signs. So that's a large population. Now nearly 30% of our children are either pre-diabetic or diabetic. The Center for Disease Control has projected now that any child born after the year 2000, 1/3 of them will become diabetic. If they happen to be Black, Hispanic, or Native American, it's up to 50% are going to become diabetic. So this is our modern epidemic. And we know the complications of diabetes when our patients have to deal with. So for those you may know and not know, but prediabetes, what Dr. Gerald Ravens has done is he's added different things that they're showing are related. The underlying root problem is insulin resistance. It's central weight gain. And because you see all these other problems that go with it, physicians who really work with this, we call it killer fat, because there's high blood pressure is part of it. A low HDL or good cholesterol, elevated VLDL cholesterol is dramatic. But here's what people tend to forget about is the triglycerides. These people develop a dyslipidemia. In other words, triglycerides go up and HDL cholesterol goes down. Total cholesterol may not change, even LDL cholesterol. Eventually that VLDL goes up. Well, then they get elevated blood sugars. And then you get an increased risk of heart disease and diabetes. But now we know that underlying cause of obstructive sleep apnea is now insulin resistance and even polycystic ovarian disease. So this is where we are. So, most of you know this, insulin is our storage hormone. Insulin's job is to control blood sugar levels by transporting sugar, glucose from the bloodstream into the cell to be utilized as energy or stored as glycogen or fat. Now, insulin job, it also converts excessive sugar or glucose into fat and stores it in the fat cells of our abdomen, and it blocks the release of that fat. And what happens is, and you'll start to understand when I explain tipping over into insulin resistance, but we all know now that when an individual does become less and less sensitive to his or her own insulin, the body compensates for this situation by significantly increasing the production of insulin. So insulin levels, blood insulin levels go up. But we also don't realize that glucagon, there's a counter-regulatory hormone with every hormone. Well, glucagon is insulin's counter-regulatory hormone, but glucagon release is stimulated when blood sugars become too low in the hypoglycemic range. So glucagon stimulates the release of fat and converts our fat to sugar and raises our blood sugar. However, when we become more and more resistant to our own insulin, we also become resistant to glucagon. It doesn't work as well. So we're talking about hormonal imbalance. And these are the two keys. These are the two keys you're dealing with, is that insulin's not operating normally, and neither is glucagon. So you have to ask yourself, well, how does insulin resistance develop? I'm a practitioner. I'm looking at this. Well, insulin resistance is the result of poor lifestyles, which are primarily the all-American diet, and I'll explain why, combined with a lack of activity. We know activities decline. We're eating garbage. Studies show that 80% of the carbohydrates consumed in the US and Canada are high glycemic, which I'll show why it spikes your blood sugar and why that's dangerous. But day in, day out, you are repeatedly spiking your blood sugar and overstimulating the release of insulin. It's like hollering wolf all the time. We just keep, stimulating insulin and overstimulating it, and we become less and less sensitive to it. So what I'm going to show you, is you got to understand that we wake up in the morning, and your physicians and we start out with a fasting blood sugar. And what happens is, since most of us eat a high glycemic breakfast, whether it's a bagel, orange juice, instant oatmeal, whatever, it rapidly raises the blood sugar level. And that rising blood sugar does two things. It causes tremendous inflammation in your arteries, especially your small capillaries. And what happens is that causes them to go into spasm. Ultrasound studies of the capillaries and the radial arteries show that spasm lasts for about 4 to 5 hours after a high glycemic meal. But this rapidly rising blood sugar also overstimulates release of insulin, because the body must control blood sugar in a very narrow range. Our brain thinks on blood sugar. And since we don't have insulin receptors in the brain cells, the body's got to control blood sugar's level. So insulin is stimulated, but it's overstimulated, drives that blood sugar down into the hypoglycemic range. And once we get down here, if we allow that to keep going, we realize this in our insulin-dependent diabetics, if that keeps going down, not only do you get a shaky weakness, you get confused, you can go into a coma. So the low blood sugar stimulates the release of our stress hormones, not only adrenaline and cortisol, but glucagon and human growth hormone, to drive that blood sugar back up to normal. Well, sure, that blood sugar comes up to normal. However, what we find is that all of a sudden now we got a high level of stress hormones in our bloodstream. And what that leads to, the medical literature spells this out clearly. It is hyperphagia, which is it's an uncontrollable hunger. No matter what, you have to eat again. You have no choice. It's a natural physiologic response for spiking your blood sugar. And whoops, there goes, we usually crave another high glycemic meal, and we spike it again. We do this, we repeatedly do this over and over, day in and day out. And so that over time causes us to become less and less sensitive to our own insulin. But let me talk about hyperphagia. You have to share with your patients the greatest drug they put in their bodies are the foods they choose to eat. And this hypoglycemia that is caused by eating the high glycemic meal sets off the release of our stress hormones. And I shared in the medical literature, we call these counter-regulatory hormones. These drive the blood sugar back up, and it goes through this. But you have no choice. You have to eat again. But this is what leads to what I call carbohydrate addiction. It's a strong problem. I mean, caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, drugs, any, it can be as strong as that. In fact, when you're dealing with your patients, I'll share some, when I start telling them what they have to do, they go into a shaky, they start shaking right in front of me and say, "Oh, doc, I don't know if I can do this." But that's called hyperphagia, and we don't talk about it. But the reason we're overeating is because we're eating the wrong thing. And so what we've been calling emotional eating and cravings all these years is simply the natural physiologic response that occurs after spiking your own blood sugar. And this is what sets off all the hormonal imbalances that we're going to be dealing with as you start to understand this. Now, I want to share here, you don't wake up one morning and suddenly you're diabetic. It just doesn't happen. Now, I'm talking about type 2 diabetes, 90% of it, sure, we have some insulin dependent adults, but it's not juvenile diabetes. We're actually talking about type 2 diabetes, which is 90% of the diabetics. Insulin resistance is defined as becoming less and less sensitive to your own insulin. It takes 10 to 15 years of poor lifestyles to actually develop insulin resistance or prediabetes. And there are four distinct stages I have been able to identify as the stages of insulin resistance. Now, stage 1 of insulin resistance, a lot of times I call it insulin abuse. It's just more signs that you might look for: fatigue, cravings, this uncontrollable hunger. They get patterns of nighttime eating. They crave food at night. They start having an expanding waist size. And of course, they come into me and they'll come into you because, gee, I've tried this diet, that diet, I can't lose weight. Their blood pressure starts to go up. Remember, we used to think 140/90 was good. Now we're starting to say, gee, we want the blood pressure under 120/80. Well, that's because we're seeing these small changes occur and we know where it's going. So just seeing even 130/86 or 90, you become concerned. Now, fasting blood sugars, we didn't worry about those over 125 milligrams per deciliter, but now we know we get concerned when it gets over 90. So those are some of the signs that you may see with someone in stage 1 insulin resistance. Now, stage 2 is really pretty well defined. And I've written about this and I'll share my books and stuff like that. But what we find, you can have an isolated low HDL cholesterol. In men, we get worried when it's under 40 milligrams per deciliter. Women, when it gets less than 50. And that may be the only sign you see. But the next thing you start to see as you follow these people, and this is what I saw in the firemen, the policemen, I could go back and look at their lab work, from years and years and even decades before, and I could see these small changes occurring. Well, they have increasing levels of triglycerides. The triglycerides go up. But what I found, everybody seems to have a lipid profile. And what you want to do, drawing blood insulin levels is expensive. It's not as, I don't think it's as standardized as you would like. So what I've done is I divide their triglyceride level by their HDL cholesterol. Everybody, just look at it, you'll see it. If it's greater than 2, they have tipped over into at least stage 2 insulin resistance. Now, as we go, it gets higher and higher and higher. Now, in insulin abuse, a lot of times you don't see this happening. But when you start to see this HDL or triglyceride divided by HDL cholesterol getting greater than 2, they have tipped over into insulin resistance. A lot of times fasting blood sugars are now greater than 100. And like I said, your blood pressure is greater than 130/85. But one thing you'll learn is we start measuring the waist size. It's pretty simple. I mean, all the naturopaths, anybody that's out there, just take out, everybody kind of knows their blood pressure. And a lot of times they'll bring in the blood work to you, and you can look at it from a different angle than most physicians. But a further expanding waist size, this is critical. Women, they get to over 32 inches to 34 inches. Men, if they get over 36 to 39 inches, they've tipped over into this stage 2 insulin resistance, and they're well on their way to becoming pre-diabetic. Now, let me tell you what I've learned. In men, I measure them 1 inch below their umbilicus over their iliac crest. That works well in men. In women, I find that just the way God made them, it's not the easiest thing. So what I do is I measure the smallest part of their waist size, because sometimes it's not, I don't get up around the rib cage, but sometimes if you get too low, you get thrown off with that. But that's what I find in stage 2. Now, stage 3 is defined in the medical literature very carefully. It's full-blown insulin resistance or prediabetes. A patient has to have 3 or more of the following. In fact, I'm reading studies now that if you even have 2 of these, you can be diagnosed with prediabetes. But it's a high blood pressure greater than 140/90, a waist size in women over 34.5 inches, and in men over 40 inches. The third thing would be elevated triglyceride level greater than 150 milligrams per deciliter, a low HDL in women, of course, less than 50, men less than 40. And then you'll see, I find a triglyceride HDL ratio is usually greater than 4. So it's going up. It'll go up to 4, and then it goes up to 6. A year later, it might be 7 or 8. You just see it going up. And a fasting blood sugar over 100, but especially over 110. Now, if you have 2 or 3 of these, the people don't have all of these. They may have, they may have one. Some don't even gain weight, but it's there. So that gives you what is considered stage 3 of insulin resistance. Now, stage 4 is diabetes itself, type 2. So when a patient develops stage 4 of insulin resistance, they have become diabetic by all our definitions. They have met not only the full criteria of the stage 3 that I just went over, but now their fasting blood sugar or their 2-hour postprandial blood sugar is greater than 125. Their hemoglobin A1C is greater than 6.5%. And here again, if you do have a hemoglobin A1C, notice that the prediabetes level is somewhere between 5.7 and 6.4. Now, most labs report a hemoglobin A1C less than 5.7 as being normal. So stage 4 is being diabetic itself. Now, the physicians, this is a graph, or it was actually a flyer brought into me by a pharmaceutical rep trying to sell me Avandia, or not sell me to prescribe Avandia. And I thought it was really telling. It tells, this is a graph here of about 25 years, if you look at it. And you could go way back here, 10, 15 years, because people come in and the green line or the yellow line is insulin resistance. They have normal insulin activity, but then they eventually tip over into this abnormal metabolic state we are now calling prediabetes. And as that insulin resistance gets worse, the body compensates for this by actually making more insulin. So insulin production goes up. And as long as these 2 lines parallel, blood sugars remain normal. And when I first started studying this back in the late 1990s and really looking at it, studies came out of Mayo, and they were just saying, doctors just focus on blood sugars, and blood sugars stay normal. And so what they find is that eventually the old, pancreas can't keep putting out that much insulin. So after about 10, 12, 15 years being pre-diabetic, all of a sudden insulin production drops, and then whoops, there goes the blood sugar. And we're diagnosing diabetes out in this area. So they've all had accelerated aging of their arteries for 15, 20 years even before we start treating patients for diabetes. Well, what they have found is that the day we diagnose as physicians, the patient being diabetic in your medical practice, 60% already have major cardiovascular disease. Well, why is that? That tells you we're behind the 8 ball. And that is why 80% of our type 2 diabetics die prematurely from a cardiovascular event, heart attack, stroke, ruptured aneurysm. You know, this is it. If this was true in 1960, 1980, 2000, and it's true today. And I'll get to a consensus opinion that I think you will enjoy seeing to understand this. We're looking at it. Well, what happened is this is where I started to recognize. I just showed you level 1, level 2 of insulin resistance or this is where we've got to start focusing. And that's why what I showed you on those slides, you pick it up early, you'll start to see it and recognize it very quickly in every one of your medical practices, no matter what you're doing. It's really easy to pick up. You don't have to be, but once you start to understand this, and that most physicians just look at blood sugar, we got to become really, good at early diagnosis because they respond so quickly. When I did my clinical trials, all 3 of my clinical trials with the, what I shared, diet, exercise, and nutritional supplementation, all of which improve insulin sensitivity, we dropped blood insulin levels 50% in every study. We dropped them down. Their metabolic health significantly improved. And this is why I was excited. That's why I started writing books and all of that. But now we've become much more sophisticated because people are starting to understand this, and we're educating lay people to do this. So let me just review a little bit so you start to get a better understanding what's happening to your patients. When you tip over into this abnormal metabolic state, a calorie is no longer a calorie. Now that's important because that's been the weight loss industry's mantra for the last 75 years. In other words, calories in must be less than calories out, or you're not going to lose any weight. But when you tip over, finally, I showed you in that graph, tip over into this abnormal metabolic state, you cannot utilize calories normally. The medical literature shows, and this was a real revelation to me, that the muscle becomes insulin resistant first, and they cannot use calories normally. Well, why is that important? It's important because the muscle normally takes up 90% of all our calories from any meal or snack and utilizes it as energy. But if they can't do that, the body can't utilize calories normally. So now many of those calories are now diverted to the fat cells of the abdomen. And if you remember, I told you about insulin's job also is to convert glucose to fat and store it in the central fat cells of the body and then block the release of that fat. This is why when you tip over, a calorie is no longer a calorie. You hold on to fat like a sponge holds on to water, and you're resistant to weight loss. You can't lose weight. And this is why you've got to reverse this. That's what I came to the conclusion. And so how do you improve insulin sensitivity? Well, back in 1990, I sat there and I said, well, gee, if it's poor lifestyles that got us into this mess in the beginning, it only made sense to me that healthy lifestyles that actually improve insulin sensitivity would be the answer. And I studied the medical literature for 3.5 years before I wrote my book, just studying everything I could in mainstream, the JAMA, the Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine. This is where these studies came from. It's out there. But the medical literature showed that by firmly establishing, for me, a triad of healthy lifestyles that all have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, all from a different mechanism, was the answer. So you got to understand the program when you start seeing the drops and everything, because this is the basis of the program. This is why I basically was brought on. But by firmly establishing these healthy lifestyles, you can potentially tip back into a normal metabolic state and reverse this entire process. But it's not drugs. Drugs aren't going to do it. It's got to be lifestyles. But this also allows you to balance your hormones so they can do their job effectively again and normally. And you begin to actually release fat. This is it. My patients say, gee, Dr. Strand, what's so hard about never going hungry, feeling great, having energy, focus? Jeepers, my health parameters are improving, and triglycerides and blood sugar, blood pressure, all that, and I'm losing weight and I'm not trying. Why aren't they not trying? Because we're not relying on willpower. You don't rely on willpower. We are just focused on lifestyles, and that's where the success comes from, and this is where we're going. So Partner Co, their Slenderized program, and I can't emphasize this some more. It's a program, are healthy lifestyles, not a diet. I mean, if we treat this as a diet, or you're going to take the drops as magic pills, just like they do Ozempic, I'll tell you, I've been through it. I've been through fen-phen. I've been through I started back, with the amphetamines. I had, when I was in medical school, that's what we did. I mean, everybody was taking all this stuff and staying up all night trying to study and losing weight. I mean, I've been through it all. They're not effective. They gain the weight back. Ozempic will be the same. We're going to find out that, this GI paralysis they're getting, the dysautonomia, it's going to be major. And that's what always happens. Fen-phen, I would not prescribe it. And I lost a lot of people. I mean, I was strong about it, but then Mayo Clinic came out with a study that if you were on fen-phen for over 3 months, you had a 30% chance of having heart valve damage. It's crazy, but we're going to, all these drugs. I wrote the book Death by Prescription. And the main thing, I wasn't against drugs, but I just wanted people to realize that the day the FDA releases a drug to the public for use, they know less than half of the adverse side effects. Well, how do you find out the other 50%? Well, it's I had a chapter in there that I called The Great Clinical Trial, and that's what's going to happen to Ozempic. You find it out over time. Of course, the Big Pharma is great at misrepresenting. I don't want to say lying. I mean, but they're not honest. They're out to sell drugs and make money. So here's the 4-part comprehensive healthy lifestyle, and I'll explain. SlenderX and Accelerate. I've added now to a healthy diet, one that does not spike the blood sugar, adequate water intake, moderate exercise. I know we've got a sports physician here, and I used to be a half miler in college, and I ran a lot. I ran a lot in my life, and but I'm a big fan of Kenneth Cooper. And Dr. Cooper coined the term aerobics back when I started medicine in the 70s. And he really, he was my hero. But he wrote a book that's called The Antioxidant Revolution, if you want to go back and look at an old book. And it really showed that modest exercise is fine. And we have tremendous benefits, including improving insulin sensitivity. But if we over-exercise, it can be dangerous to our health. And that's why he wrote the book. But then nutritional supplementation, and I'll share each one of these. So let me just talk to you. What is a healthy diet? And I'm being very brief here because I've got books. I've got a lot of these Zoom calls that have been recorded where I talk about it. But a healthy diet is defined as consuming those healthy, low glycemic carbohydrates, the good fats, and good proteins. The body needs all of them, but just like we found out there are bad fats and good fats, there are good proteins and bad proteins. There's good carbohydrates and there's bad ones. These are all primarily whole foods that have not been processed. What you'll learn, the enemies are the highly processed grains and the almighty potato. And so what we find is that the more man processes these grains, the more it sets up that the body can absorb the sugars from those grains faster. And so if you take let's say you soak whole oats overnight and you eat them in the morning, it's a low glycemic meal. If you have slow cooked rolled oats, that's a medium glycemic index meal. But if you have instant oatmeal, it's high glycemic. The more man processes, the worse it is. The apple's better than applesauce. The applesauce better than apple juice. The apple juice is better than the sweetened diluted apple juice. Stay on the outside aisles of your grocery store. Don't go for the processed food. But that's what you have to understand. So there's a concept, and this is David Jenkins' work out of the University of Toronto, but he started to look at foods, and determine their glycemic index. And he gave glucose a glycemic index of 100. Well, then a baked potato is 85, cornflakes 84, bread 70, actually white bread 71, wheat bread is 70. But look at table sugar. it's 61. Well, we always think table sugar is the worst thing. This is what we do. The peach is 28, sweet cherry is 22, black beans 20. So they're very low they're not going to spike your blood sugar down here, but these foods will. And so here's the USDA food pyramid. I've been talking, look at the base of the USDA food pyramid: bread, cereal, rice, pasta, 6 to 11 servings. That's what they're promoting. The vegetable group, 3 to 5, and fruit. Then we get this, but look at what's used sparingly: fats, oils, and sweet, sugar. But what I'm telling you, and I'm a nutritionist at Harvard, all of this, they've written books and they said, this is the way the food pyramid should look. This is the diet we're talking about. Flour, rice, cereal, potatoes, all of that stuff, breads, it is worse than sugar. It should be above. And our basis should be whole foods, all the whole fruits and vegetables. And everybody has their different approach, but this is important. Get in the good fats, the omega-3s, the monounsaturated fats, all of that. That's what you want. So that's what we promote. So we've looked at the high glycemic meal. So let's look now at what happens with a low glycemic meal. So let's just say you wake up in the morning and you have a veggie omelet and fruit. Okay. Well, your blood sugar will go up, yes, but it doesn't go up high. It goes up slowly. Yeah, insulin's released, but it's never over, it's not over release. It comes back to baseline, but it doesn't go into this hypoglycemic range. And they have shown in the medical literature, you have one low glycemic meal, blood insulin levels drop after one meal. If you have two, it drops more. So this is improving insulin sensitivity from a particular mechanism. And yes, you're hungry, but just eat again and just don't have another high glycemic meal. Now, it takes 5 to 10 days normally to get out of this carbohydrate addiction. If they're really bad, I've had them take up to 3 weeks, but they will get out of it. But what they have shown in the medical literature, that if you spike your blood sugar one time and you set off this uncontrollable hunger, it lasts for 2 to 3 days after one meal that was high glycemic. You just can't, you don't want to cheat on this program. So when you eat a meal or snack that does not spike your blood sugar, you're not overstimulating the release of insulin, and therefore you don't fall into the hypoglycemic range. After eating just one low glycemic meal, your blood insulin levels begin to fall and your glucagon becomes more effective in releasing fat. That's your fat releasing hormone, is glucagon. You want it effective. You also significantly reduce your stress hormones. We talk about stress and emotional stress in life, but one of the greatest causes of increased stress hormones is spiking your blood sugar. And so it takes 5 to 10 days to kind of get out of this and settle down. But this improves just doing this. I did it for 15 years before we had the drops. Just doing this significantly improves your appetite, and you don't. Now, sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, we really don't know their effect. We do know, though, that polycystic ovarian disease seems to be, which is a major cause of infertility, is a result of underlying insulin resistance. Now, no one makes claims that the drops affect this, but we got all kinds of stories, but it's not been studied. We don't know. But we do know that when you get pregnant, I did OB for 21 years, and we always check blood sugars. Check for diabetes mid trimester, just to see if they're becoming gestational diabetes. Well, even if they were normal and they didn't have it, I had many of my gals who were pregnant were gaining 40 to 60 pounds, and they had big babies. But what I now realize when I look back at that is the fact that, jeepers, I think they were in insulin resistance, but they wasn't bad enough that their blood sugars were up. Now, another thing that affects weight gain in that is being in perimenopause, menopause. And as you start to improve, I see improvements of these. We don't know, no one's making a claim with the sex hormones, but we have a lot of people that feel much better. Now, I want to share this Pure Nourish. This is something that we developed early on at PartnerCo. And this is, we use this in my clinical trials, a meal or snack replacement. And the beauty of this, it's low glycemic, it's non-GMO, it's gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free, and it's a pea protein. It's just a really healthy meal replacement. So when I was doing the clinical trials, we used 2 meal replacements, and then we'd have them eat 2 healthy low glycemic snacks and 1 healthy low glycemic meal. Now, PartnerCo's developed a wonderful Giving Greens, and you can learn, but I still do this every morning. I have one of these, and I put the Giving Greens in. I'm putting in other things, fruit, frozen fruit. But what it does, this is a tremendous behavioral modification tool. If in your medical practice, and it's part of the food budget, it's not, this is just a meal replacement. And it probably costs $3 to $3.50, $3 to $4, depending on what you put in it, to have this meal. And jeepers, try to go out and even have a mocha or a white, just any kind of a coffee drink that it's $5, $6, $7 now. It's amazing. But what I do is people can start to experience a low glycemic healthy diet really quick. And I use this a lot in my practice. Now, I get people just to start exercising. Now, like I said, it's modest exercise. Aerobic activity is key. I'm not against weight resistance training, but what the medical literature shows that if you can build up to 30 minutes of moderate aerobic activity 5 days a week, now it's brisk walking, cycling, swimming, biking, whatever you choose. The key is the aerobic activity significantly improves insulin sensitivity from a different mechanism. Not the same as a diet. This acts differently. So now you've got 2 lifestyle changes that are helping you improve insulin sensitivity. The only thing the body cannot handle is inactivity. Okay. Now, the other thing that the medical literature shows that nutritional supplementation improves insulin sensitivity. And one of the frustrating things you're going to find is that when they study nutritional supplements, they study them a lot like drugs. They'll study 1 nutrient at a time. They'll do a study on magnesium or vitamin D or vitamin C. And the amazing thing is even doing just 1 of these nutrients, I would say 80+% of the studies done show a health benefit. But I focus strictly on improving insulin sensitivity. Vitamin C does supplementation, vitamin E, grapeseed, magnesium, chromium, vitamin D. All of these improve insulin sensitivity, again, from a different mechanism. And when you combine them, and I'll share with you, I believe in a concept called cellular nutrition. Even though they study them individually, I promote it to my patients as part of a healthy lifestyle, along with a healthy diet, along with modest exercise, to take nutritional supplements. I recommend cellular nutrition, which provides all of the essential nutrients to the cells at their optimal or advanced levels, not RDA levels. And these levels have been shown to provide a health benefit in our medical literature. That's what I study. That's all my references. That's what I do. So that it's not just hocus pocus. This is in our medical literature. It's just that big pharma isn't going to go out and promote a study on vitamin E or vitamin D. They're out to sell drugs, so we don't see much of it. Now, MOA, I know that a lot of the people are using MOA and they love it. Some people, hey, that's great. It's loaded with antioxidants, and I like my patients to use both. I like the Optimal M, Optimal V, because all of this is put in 2 bottles, and we know the minerals are important in insulin sensitivity. So what I noticed then as I've added SlenderX and Accelerate is that not only do they improve insulin sensitivity, but they allow my patients to accomplish these goals that used to take me 12 weeks. They get it done in 6 weeks. They're losing weight twice as fast. They're just, it works great. So I'm going to just tell you Slenderex is a homeopathic supplement, and I don't know how some of you out there are probably very familiar with homeopathy, but what they did, and when I was with Partner Co, I was there when we brought the Slenderex and Accelerate in, and I got to talk to the homeopathic physician who put this together. But it's basically 10 ingredients. Several of the homeopathic ingredients improve insulin sensitivity, again, from a different mechanism. They improve both insulin and glucagon. Others suppress your appetite. Others increase your metabolism. You're going to see that. Others decrease stress and anxiety. And now Accelerate works with that too. And so this actually improves mood, stress, and others in there actually decrease your desire for sugar and these high glycemic carbohydrates. You know, it's discipline in a bottle is one of the chiropractors I work with said, and I think that's true. People that do this and they add Slenderex and Accelerate, it's a difficult thing to change lifestyle habits. And so that's what you find. Now, Accelerate not only contains high doses of vitamin B12 for increased energy and metabolism, but they contain two very solid aromatic herbs, ashwagandha and rhodiola. Now, these help reduce stress, and they have a major calming effect. I'll tell you, that you hardly talk to anybody that starts these that doesn't notice a calming effect, improvement in their mood. You know, it's amazing. I've actually, in my practice, you know, I deal with a lot of bipolar, manic depressive, this and that, and over the years, they don't want to quit the Accelerate, you know, even when they've reached their health and weight goals. I mean, it's just that effective. So you combine these, Accelerate and Slenderex, and you start not only supporting and balancing your hormones, but it also helps your mood, it helps your energy, decreases your appetite as it improves insulin sensitivity. So now I have 4 mechanisms that are improving insulin sensitivity. And so what I'm finding now is that just like what happens as you start to improve insulin resistance, and all these do that, and this drops, blood insulin levels begin to drop. Well, what happens? Well, as blood insulin levels drop, gee, your blood pressure goes down, your triglycerides come down, your blood sugars come down, you know, your cholesterols come down, the VLDL comes down. You start seeing this, and I just challenge any practitioner out there, just try this with your patients for 12 weeks. I found 12 weeks is a very good time to repeat blood work and examine them. You can do it too quick. And I'm not a big fan of weighing. I found that my patients who come into me weighing themselves, if you use weight loss as a motivator, sooner or later they don't lose as much weight as they think they should, or they're not losing as much as that person who posted on Facebook, or shame, they actually gain some weight. They say, oh, this isn't working for me. So I don't weigh. I like them realizing, gee, went down from a size 16 to a 12, you know, or I'm cinching up my belt loop. I'm doing this, you know. And so what I find is that as they improve insulin sensitivity, it just goes down, 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 and blood sugars get better. And in the clinical trials, we were able to tip people back into a normal metabolic state, and they began releasing fat. Why? Because the glucagon was now working. Insulin levels, your storage hormone, is now dropping down. And that's the balancing hormone. The stress hormones are out, because not only do the homeopathic drops and Accelerate help, but also the way you eat decreases your stress and your stress hormones. So all of this begins to happen, and that's why. But I want to show you, I get patients way out here that are already diabetic. Well, they're not going to respond as quickly as someone right here. And so they got to work longer, you know, and my diabetics, my first goal with diabetics, I don't change any medication, I don't do anything. I just want to get their diabetes under control. Did you know that the average diabetic, type 2, their hemoglobin A1C averages 9.4? they're not under control. That's the average. And so the first goal with my diabetics is to actually control their diabetes. Well, with their medication. And what happens is that happens fairly quickly. And all of a sudden, remember, hemoglobin A1C is measuring the blood, the blood sugars in a red blood cell, which has a life of 140 days. So it takes a while for that to come down. Yeah, the blood sugars are a spot check, but you want to watch the hemoglobin A1C. But then as it comes down and they eventually will tip back and gee, their hemoglobin A1C is under 7. It's under 6.5. I mean, they're thrilled. Well, then all of a sudden they start getting shaky, weak, and they're doing, well, then as a physician, I got to back off their medications because they're getting hypoglycemic because they're on the meds. And I have to back off, and pretty soon they're coming into me and whoa, they're controlling their diabetes and they're not on any medication. And then you go another 5-6 months and they come back and their hemoglobin A1C is 5.2. And I do a glucose tolerance test and it's normal. And I'm sitting there, you've reversed your diabetes. And people say, oh, you can't do that. Oh, yes, you can. And we see it all the time. And that's, now I'm not trying to make, it just happens, and you as physicians, you're going to see it. You're going to see things you've never seen before, not on any drugs or anything. And that's what's exciting. So, there's a fat loss, releasing fat phase in a maintenance phase. And I share this, everybody, I want to stay on the, what I call a fat loss releasing fat phase until they reach their health and weight goals. You don't want to quit it too soon because they quit losing. So they've got to get through that carbohydrate addiction, continue the fat releasing phase, which is avoiding all bread, flour, rice, cereal, pasta, potatoes, all of that stuff, and eating whole foods. And everybody's got their food list. I'm not out here trying to say this is better than this or that. Some want to avoid dairy, some want to avoid this, and they're having wonderful success. And they're figuring it out. But then once they've reached their health and weight goal, they can reintroduce, and we teach them those healthy, lower glycemic breads. The Ezekiel bread, the sprouted breads, they have a glycemic index around 55. The rice, Uncle Ben's long rice, or basmati rice. Now, I went over and I was speaking in Malaysia several years ago, and it was during Ramadan. And after I got done with all talking to them, I was talking about 40 physicians. They came up and says, why do we have so much diabetes in Malaysia? And of course, I didn't know the answer. And I knew they had to have something in their diet. And they said 10% of our population now are diabetics. We can't get enough dialysis machines. We got to go to Hong Kong in the black market to get them. And I says, well, what kind of rice do they? They said, well, we eat tons of jasmine rice. Well, I told you glucose is 100 glycemic index. Jasmine's rice is 115. It's worse than glucose. And you just start to see it. But there are healthy rices, there are healthy cereals. The red potatoes are lower glycemic. Sweet potatoes are lower than that. And yams are in the 20s. So you teach people they can have this. But you continue firmly establishing those healthy lifestyles so they just become part of your life. Now, with my diabetic patients, I can explain. I would initially have wonderful success. But if they didn't, if I could get my patient to make one of these lifestyle changes, I saw some improvement. If I could get them to do 2 of the 3, diet, exercise, and supplement, I saw a little bit more improvement. But if they did all 3, the results were simply phenomenal. And if I started to see a loss of something, well, I think they quit something. But then when I added SlenderX and Accelerate, all this happened twice as fast and much easier for my patients. So that's there. So you know this in medicine, one of the toughest things is getting people to make healthy lifestyle choices. It takes patient motivation. Like I said, you got to warn people, it takes 1 to 3 weeks to get out of this carbohydrate addiction. And if they cheat, they can set off that uncontrollable hunger for 2 to 3 days afterwards. So they can go through withdrawal. As I've added SlenderX and Accelerate, they were designed and developed to help individuals make these lifestyle changes. That's why I call it a discipline in a bottle. and they make everything more effective. So here's one thing I found, and I want to share this with you. This is very important. When I first started doing this in my medical practice, I had a nutritionist come in on Tuesday and Thursday nights and teach my patients the diet, the exercise, all of that. And they just heard that's what I did. And then I'd see them back in 12 weeks and I asked them, how's it going? Oh, they loved the program. They thought it was great. They couldn't believe uh, everything I was telling them. They were believers. But then I'd check their blood work. I would check them and I was very, very disappointed. My results were very disappointing. And I almost gave up until my 2 nurse practitioner, I sat down, what's going wrong? What are we doing? Why aren't we having success? We're following everything. Then I started, they said, why don't we have our patients write down everything they eat, how they take their supplements, now the Slender X, what they're drinking, every meal, how they're exercising, and put it on just a simple sheet of paper and a week's and they'll come in each week and they saw my nurse practitioners. And what they did is they would just review it, pick out a few things, and the accountability was there. And I would have them see them weekly for the first 6 weeks, every other week for the last 6 weeks. Then I would see them back. And I have to tell you, the results that I saw were simply phenomenal. They weren't just good, they were phenomenal. Before I was witnessing maybe a 10 to 15% success rate. After this, I had an 80% success rate. And what I found and what I realized is all I was doing was allowing my patients to take, subconscious lifestyle habits and make them conscious. That's all it was. So I didn't need to ask for perfection. All I needed to do was ask for honesty. And what happened was in the clinical trials, we used a cutoff. If they did the diet 80% of the time, if they did supplements 80% of the time, and they did the exercise 80% of the time, those are the ones that we looked at, and they had tremendous success. So you don't have to be perfect. Now you do better, it happens quicker. But now, this is the amazing thing to me. I mean, when I went down, Ashley, and I was down with Todd and watched Brent and you guys and see the people down in Panama City. I mean, I sat here and I just couldn't believe the results everybody was getting. And I knew there had to be accountability. So I started talking to you guys and the people from, Dr. Crystal Vance, who's a chiropractor. And what they're doing is now they've figured out social media, which is now the new approach to accountability and support. And it allows individuals who are challenging themselves to become more proactive in protecting their health much easier. They got a support system. And everyone should take advantage of some of this social program. Now, let me just stop here because I'm talking to a lot of healthcare professionals. If I run into 2 people when I talk to my doctors bringing this stuff into their practice or however they want to, many of my patients our physicians are so busy, the last thing they want is to try to get busier. Well, then I refer them out to these people, the brand partners, the people understand this, to support, and then you see your patients back in 12 weeks. That's great. But if you're starting up or you want to get more into functional medicine or this is what you want to do, then go ahead and have either a mid-level, a nurse practitioner, or someone doing this and looking at this. I mean, there are programs you can look on it online. I had an online program, but we saw them every week, and now we were able to bill out. Never got turned down ever, because now insulin resistance is a diagnostic code. Then look at everything else you can add to it. High blood pressure, dyslipidemia, hyperinsulinemia. All of that stuff is now a diagnostic code. You put it down, you can have no trouble billing it out, and it is supported by Medicare, all of it. So it depends which way you want to go. But here's my final thing. It says Partner Co. Slenderized program is not a diet. It's a program. It's a healthy lifestyles that happen to have a side effect of permanent fat loss. Now, weight loss is great, but keeping it off is priceless. And for anybody who wants to know, this is my book, Healthy for Life. It's all in here. And you got to become more familiar with other things like you know, like not only glycemic index, but glycemic load. And there's things that, and I go through all of the medical, there's around 30 pages of medical references, but I put this back up as an ebook on Kindle. My publisher finally backed off, and actually they went bankrupt, and so it hasn't, but it's on there. If you just put in Dr. Ray Strand, Healthy for Life ebook on Kindle, I've got it just $7.50, but it's a good reference for anybody who wants to know more. And I think as physicians, you want to know this, but there's another thing I want you to understand. I was doing this since 1995, 96. And I was saying, why aren't we treating prediabetes as aggressively as diabetes? Because when they become diabetic, it's too late. Well, here is the diagnosis and management of prediabetes by the American College of Endocrinology and the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists. They met in 2008 or 9. And they said, but here's their conclusion. We should be treating prediabetes as aggressively as we do diabetes, because by the time they become diabetic, it's too late. So they looked at the worldwide medical literature, and what did they decide? They said the management of prediabetes involves a set of global treatment measures designed to address its abnormalities and cardiometabolic metabolic disease risk. The preferred treatment approach for all of these abnormalities is intensive lifestyle management, not drugs, given its safety and strength of evidence for its effectiveness in improving glycemia and reducing cardiovascular risk factors. And this goes on. Now, I'll send this to Ashley or Susan Frank or some. I think people have it, but I have this. Of course, you'll have trouble finding it. But what happens is this really states everything. And and then just as a reference for you guys, I just want to, the meaningful triglyceride HDL ratio, I just do this as an indirect test for blood insulin levels. As I told you, insulin rises when they tip over. So the higher the ratio, the higher the levels of insulin. That's what it tells you. And they have gotten a lipid profile. And even if you're a naturopath or a chiropractor, they bring the lab work into you and really look at it. And so the ratio is very critical, and it's a simple thing. Take out a tape measure. What have your blood pressures been? I mean, it's not too hard to do this in anybody's practice. And there's another huge line of all of these. You may decide to add additional nutritional supplements to your basic Slenderized program. And I can go over this another time, but I'm going to quit sharing here now, and just let you, if there's any question. I know I went long, but I had a lot of people I wanted to share. You don't get this many medical people on a call, so I kind of maybe got a little long-winded, but I hope you enjoyed it.
That was amazing, Dr. Strand. Thank you so much. Does anybody want to ask any questions here?
I actually typed one in.
Kelly wants to know, are all juices bad, such as vegetable juices?
No. Everybody gets worried about, you can get, I'm going to get in trouble probably, but one thing that I found in juicing, it's what you put in. Vegetables are low glycemic. See, I try to keep it simple in my medical practice. I just want to teach people how to eat or drink juices or that they don't spike their blood sugar, because it doesn't matter. And I'm not really, I don't count calories. I don't count grams of fat. I don't count grams of carb. I don't weigh people, because if you learn this, they know it. I mean, anybody that's a diabetic that has a glucose monitor on, they know exactly what I'm saying is true. But fruit, all fruit. See, once you understand glycemic load, for example, watermelon has a glycemic index of 71. Well, you look at that, oh, that's high. You don't want to stick that in. But you look at the glycemic load, it's only like 4. Anything less than 10 is I'll use carrots as an example. A glycemic index of carrots is 49 if you're juicing that. But its glycemic load is 3. What does that mean? You can't eat carrots fast enough or drink it fast enough to spike your blood sugar. Okay? And so that's fine. So I add fruit every morning to my drink. I mean, I like frozen strawberries or blackberries or, whatever, cherries, I just, because it varies my drinks and all that. Now, if you're a real juicer, you got to be careful, if you start getting into any processed fruits or that, but normally all fruits and all vegetables are lower glycemic whole foods. And if you grind them up, it doesn't change the fact. It doesn't, maybe it makes it a little bit more, but I'm not an anti, there are people who are good juicers. They've done very well on the program. You got to be a little bit more careful, I suppose, rather than eating the whole food, because you're still getting the fiber in juicing. You're not taking the fiber out. So hopefully that answers that question. Well, anyway, I'm available. I'm here to support you guys. All the physicians that I'm Chief Medical Officer for our Scientific Advisory Board. We're bringing on physicians, healthcare. We've got chiropractors. We've got a lot of people coming on. They're seeing things, and we got to offer our people a choice. That Ozempic isn't the only way. And I'm going to say two things about Ozempic, just in case you don't know. Studies are coming out now that in Ozempic, it's the same thing that happened with the Atkins diet. All weight loss, 50% is muscle, 50% is fat. And they look good, but they're going to run into the same problem everybody did. Even if they don't have any side effects, they do this to come off, their engine is smaller. They need fewer calories. And they're going to be yo-yo diet that's going to come right back. Number one, they can't, it's hard to afford unless someone's insurance paying. Insurance they're going to cut down on this. They're not going to be paying for this in certain situations. So we've got an alternative that works, that's healthy. And all you have to do is listen to the testimonials, and you'll understand after what I shared with you tonight, why we're seeing those testimonials that they're coming up. And that's what's exciting to me. Weight loss is great, but their health, their improvement of their health is what's dramatic. And I believe, and Dr. Holly Wyatt, that we did the clinical trial with the University of Colorado, she's the endocrinologist that did my last clinical trial with this program, minus the drops, said that, 90% of diabetes should and can be avoided if people did this program. Now, that's so people have a choice. We don't have to become diabetic. We can change the course of health in this country. And it's happening. So I'm going to end with that. How's that?
I love it. I love it. Because, Dr. Strand, you worked so long with the drops. You've got such the background and the knowledge coming into this. We cannot thank you enough. We so appreciate it. And we can do this again another time, and we can pick up where we left off with another product, or just keep it with the drops, however you guys want to do it. And if y'all have any questions, we can always get it back to Dr. Strand if you think of something later. But we so appreciate everybody's time here tonight, and appreciate Dr. Strand especially coming in and sharing his wealth of knowledge with the drops and how they're coming into changing people's life. And I love the wording is, this isn't a weight loss, this isn't a diet, because that's what's so ingrained in our heads, because that's all we know, right? This is truly a lifestyle change. And we have the community here that rallies around you, and we're just a part of that lifestyle change. So, all right. So thank everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Strand, and everybody out there. Have a great night. Susan,
thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.